Hello, everyone. This is Anant. I have with me today Mr. Awais Ahmed. He is the founder and CEO at Pixel, an Indian space technology startup that builds and operates a constellation of small satellites to collect, monitor, and analyze data through satellite imagery. Awais founded Pixel in 2019. During his final year of university, pursued a Masters of Science degree in mathematics with the vision of establishing a global space company working on bringing the benefits of space down to Earth. Pixel's first satellite is manufactured and booked to launch in February 2021 and will be the first private commercial satellite launched from India. Awais was also one of the founding members in the SpaceX Hyperloop Pod competition, where they built India's first ever Hyperloop pod and presented it to Elon Musk. So, Awais, a very warm welcome from all of us. Today, you have a global audience on the occasion of World Pulses Day, waiting to hear from you, your part of the story, how you got to this point, and I think it has been a really inspiring journey for many youngsters who would like to follow in your footsteps. So very warm welcome once again, Awais, and we'll like to hear from you how has been your journey so far.
Thank you, Anand. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. As you mentioned, right, Pixel is we're a space technology company, but we call ourselves a space data company. So there's two aspects to that, like space and data. We built a constellation of Earth imaging satellites that take photos of the Earth, and we beam them down to our ground station. And the second part of that is the data. What do we do once the images are down? How do we convert it into useful insights? It's not just enough to get down images, it's important to convert them into actionable insights that will actually impact the work on ground. As to how we started, what's the journey been, and what we're looking at, right? So, Pixel was started by myself and my co-founder Kshitij. We were still studying in the final year of our undergraduate studies here in India. We were pursuing undergraduate studies at BITS Pilani. And it was in the fourth year of our studies that we decided that this is something that we wanted to do. But there were a few experiences at college that led to this. The first one being I was a part of the student satellite team at the college, where we were interacting with and working with the Indian Space Agency, ISRO. And that taught us a lot. That taught me a lot in terms of how exactly hardware in space is to be built. The second thing that led to Pixel was being a founding team member and engineering lead at Hyperloop India. When we went about, building this pod, there were about 2,500 global teams that had applied, but only 24 were chosen as finalists to build a pod. When we came down to Bangalore to build this, there were no advisors that could guide us as to how to do this because no one had done this before. There was no material online because no one had done this before. So we had to figure out a lot of things. But the one thing that it taught us was, a bunch of young, motivated folks coming together can create something like a Hyperloop pod. And when we were at the SpaceX headquarters for the competition, they took us on a tour of the SpaceX factory. We saw rockets being built, engines being built. That's when I decided that space was the space to be in. There was no other industry or sector that I would want to work in. I'd always been fascinated with space ever since a child, like most of us are, right? But then that was when the decision was taken that this is the space to be in. So came back, started reading up as much as I could about space, what the cutting edge is, what people are doing, new companies that are coming up, how I can contribute, and started working with the existing satellite imagery that was available from commercial players, from space agencies, be it open source or paid data, and started looking at applications like pollution monitoring, started looking at applications like illegal mining monitoring, but more importantly, identifying crop diseases or pest infestation around us. That is when realized that existing satellite imagery is good for certain use cases, but there's still so much more that could be done. It was still very expensive. It was not readily available for the areas that we wanted. But very importantly, it couldn't even identify or see certain problems. If we were looking at identifying crop diseases or pest infestations, we couldn't do that. If you were looking at soil health or moisture content or irrigation levels, existing data couldn't do that. So the possibility was that we could build a much superior class of camera that we could put in a satellite that would help us see these problems. So that was where Pixel began. So instead of just analyzing data, me and my co-founder, we decided we'll take a step back and focus on the more fundamental issue, which is getting down very high quality data that can enable us to see these problems that others aren't able to see today. And we decided after certain calculations that 30 satellites is what would be needed for us to do a global coverage every 24 hours. So no matter which geographical area we're looking at, we should be able to see the changes happening at a day's notice. But before we did that, we had to prove that we could, build one satellite that could be replicated. So that's the satellite that's been now built and manufactured. We have proven that it works on ground, and we are launching that on the Indian Space Agency rocket next month, where it will go up and demonstrate this. And there's a second one that we're also working on that is booked for launch in December of this year, December 2021. We'll follow these up with 30 more in the next year or so after the second launch. So that's where we are. The plan is essentially to bring down the benefits of space down to earth through the data. So yeah, that's about us.
Great. Just a small question here, Avis. You mentioned that you are trying to build up a constellation of around 30 satellites to cover the entire Earth. So your coverage area will be India centric, or you are trying to make it a broad based for a global coverage?
It's the plan was to always be a global companies and its global coverage. The orbit we put it in will enable it such that no matter where we are launching it from, it will cover any geographical area except the extreme north and south poles. So apart from that, be it North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, or Australia, our satellites will be able to cover it. But with one satellite, the revisit rate will be much lesser. That's why the 30 come in where we still get global coverage, but we do it at a day's notice. So that's the answer. So it's not going to be country specific or region specific. It is going to be global.
Great. What is the commercial angle to this satellite? As we feel, India has just opened up the space sector, and we see a lot more investments, a lot more investors coming in this sector going forward to take the plunge in space technology. So how you get on to the commercials for your project?
So it's a capital intensive business building satellites, of course, compared to anything else. But given software or food delivery startups have raised so much money, I don't think raising much lesser than that should be an issue for something which would impact humanity like this. In terms of the commercials, right? Yes, it's a capital intensive business, as I just said. But once you have put up this infrastructure in place, there's enough usage for it globally that it returns back the investment you have put in, but also generates a lot more on top of that. And the way to do that is fairly simple. We build our satellites, we get it launched through partners, and we operate them ourselves. So it's not the satellites that we sell or the satellites that we rent out. It's the data that we license out, the data that we sell, the data that we sort of rent out for anyone that wants the data. They tell us that we want coverage for this geographical area at these dates, and we provide it to them for those dates and the area that they have asked for, and they pay us on that. And most of it is going to be subscription based, because if you're looking at agriculture, you would need to monitor your fields at a regular basis. It could be a day's notice, it could be a week's notice, it could be a 2 weeks notice. Or if you were looking at oil and gas companies where they want to monitor natural gas pipelines, again, it needs to be very repetitive thing. You need to do it every day or every week, and so it's a subscription based thing. Every time an image is taken of that area, certain payment is made depending on the contract. So it takes about an year to recover the cost that's spent on the infrastructure, and the lifetime of these satellites is about 5 to 7 years. So for 4 years after we have broken even, it's just generating on top of that. So yes, you need to put in more money than you would need to do in other companies, but it also generates more than other companies do. So that's the commercial aspect of it. We will build an online platform where people can just go in, select the area that they want to monitor, and tell us when they want to download data for what areas, and we enable it to them online. So that's the commercial angle to what we do.
Oh, great. My audience would be dying to know, what is the applicability of this project in agriculture, because we have been interacting so far on satellites, and people take this World Pulses Day event more so on concentrating on agriculture sector. So can you please highlight a bit on, how we can make use of these satellites for agri sector, and any such examples you can quote where, in the world, this Earth imagery has been prevalent in other countries, I think so, but it's new for India. So are there any such satellites is continuing to work so far in the world, which are aiding in the agriculture for specific countries?
So agriculture happens to be the one of the priority sectors for us to start with, right? Because the data that we're beaming down is specifically useful for the use cases. I just mentioned, for example, what you can do with data today is you can distinguish between farm area and urban area. What you can do with certain data sets is you can identify the health status of the crops, how the crop is doing. But what our data will enable is, for the entire cropping cycle, before a seed is sown, we'll be able to look at the soil health parameters. We'll be able to identify, what the NPK content is, whether nitrogen is missing, phosphorus is missing, and what fertilizer needs to be used to make sure that the soil is good for sowing. Combine that with weather satellite data, and you'll be able to tell what would be the right week or the right day for the farmers to sow the seeds in that soil after it's done. During the cropping season, we would be able to identify across large swaths of lands which crop is growing where, which becomes very important, which you can't do today, right? If rice is growing somewhere and what specific strain of rice, how do you distinguish between the different strains of rice that are growing in the same area, and whether it's wheat, whether it's anything else, identifying which species of crop is grown where and which strain of the same species is also grown is going to be very important when you're trying to do that. So and then whether during the growing season, how the crop itself is doing, whether it is under irrigated or over irrigated, which you can identify from the moisture content in the leaves, right? So if you're looking at a large area and you see that there's a spot in that area where the crops seem to be under irrigated, that could potentially be an issue that the sprinkler irrigation or drip irrigation system in that area faulty. People can go there and repair it, for example. And using all this data, we can predict what the yield for a particular crop is going to be. So identifying which crop is growing where, so total area, and then looking at the health status, combining all that data to identifying this could be the potential yield of this particular crop in this country, in this state, in this region, to be able to, for the government to plan out whether they need to import certain grains crops, whether they need to export certain pulses, grains crops, and things like that. So that's what specifically the data will enable in the agricultural domain. And while growing also, if there's any pest infestation that's happening or crop diseases, what pest infestation is happening? How does a pesticide company plan out its logistics to certain areas where there's more probability of having a pest infestation or more pest infestation in terms of the impact? So things like that are what our data will help in agriculture. It happens to be one of our priority sectors. And we've already done certain pilot projects with a few clients in the agri sector, right? Governments are obviously one big potential user for this, but there's also companies that have their farms. There are pesticide companies that want to know where they need to send pesticides to and things like that. So the same camera that will go on our satellite, we have put it on a drone and shown in a limited area that this works. The next step is just using satellite imagery to do it in a much, much larger area. So that's how the technology can be used for agriculture, and especially for even small holding farmers, right? The benefit needs to reach the farmers. But to be able to directly do that is a tough task. We'll need to work with cooperative societies. We need to work with government agencies because they have that reach to be able to do that. So that's how agriculture is what we're looking at from a satellite imagery perspective.
Great. So a lot of help in the agri sector for those who are involved. My next question is, always like in Southeast Asia, I see a lot of countries, they are agrarian economies. You take example of Myanmar, I am based out of, or Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia. The agriculture is the backbone of the economies. And all these countries, I find that they are still lagging behind in the space programs. So do you have, any idea on how these countries, if they want to use this technology, how they can associate and they can take the advantage of this technology for their people?
Yeah, so I think not every country needs to launch. Enough of companies globally are launching satellites which can provide data to every country anywhere. But there are also open source programs or open data programs that say the European Space Agency. The European Space Agency has a Copernicus program where they have the Sentinel satellites, and the data from that is available for free. You get that data every 5 days in almost every region in the world. So you don't even have to pay for that data. So that could be a beginning step for anyone to take this data and do basic analysis. And then you could use data such as Pixel is providing or others are providing, which add more value at a more frequent rate. So it needs to be a combination of these. And the cost for data is also reducing year on year, which makes it more and more affordable for everyone. But where satellite imagery shines is in very large scale applications. If a particular farmer is told to buy satellite imagery, it does not make sense for him. But if a government or if an agency that's looking at large areas wants to know what's happening, satellite imagery becomes the only data set that you can use for uniform, consistent, and regular coverage. What the countries can do, they have been using. There have been certain examples of companies, organizations using the open data from Sentinel. India, for example, already has a few satellites that the Indian Space Agency has launched that they use for India-specific purposes. But more and more global constellations are coming up, such as we have planned, such as Planet or Capella or others are also launching. So there is no need for launching own satellites, but just looking at what the options are, what the best data set is, and how to partner with that to make sure the entire countries are monitored is what could be done. The problem with the open data program is it becomes tougher for countries where there are small farmer holdings, where you need higher resolution, which is where commercial companies like ourselves and others comes into the picture. But for some base level analysis, open data is free and that can be worked on.
Great. Just happen to get one more question. What is the typically working age of a satellite? I mean, is there an age or is it available to us for years together?
It depends on how the satellite is built. You can build a satellite for 2 years, 3 years worth of operations. But us specifically, we have built it for a 5 to 7 year range. So once we have deployed the satellite, it will work there for 5 years, a minimum of 5 years, and it can extend beyond that. But the more you spend on making sure the satellite is robust, the longer it will stay. So it depends on how you're looking at it, but specifically for us, it's a 5 to 7 year lifetime.
Okay. Avis, is there any other sector other than this space sector or the project you are associated with currently, which your company Pixel is targeting to enter going forward?
As I said, we're a space data company, so the space aspect is always going to be there. But on the data front, yes, multiple verticals, multiple use cases. Agriculture is definitely a big one where it can impact, but there's also oil and gas companies where they want to monitor natural gas pipelines, oil pipelines. You have the climate change, forestry, and environment related use cases where monitoring forests, monitoring oceans, monitoring poisonous gases, greenhouse gases is what's going to be important. And you have certain urban monitoring, urban infrastructure monitoring things. So we're going to look at these sectors one by one, starting with agriculture and climate change, and then looking at others. But yeah, apart from that, the plan is, launch 30 satellites, get this data, make sure it impacts and benefits people down on Earth as much as possible. So yeah, that's the plan in terms of different verticals and where we plan to embed ourselves.
Okay. How big is your team currently working with you on this project?
We have, I think, including, consultants, interns, and full-time folks, it's about 40, 45 people in total. But if you're looking at the full-time people, it's about 30 in number. We were about six before lockdown and COVID. This was in February of 2020. But since then, we have, I think, grown to about 30 full-time folks and consultants and interns that add up to 40, 45. So that's the team.
Great. Avis, your journey, I am pretty sure it will be inspiring for many youngsters who are in their universities and who would like to follow your footsteps going forward. So what is your message to those Gen Next, what they should aspire for and, how they should be aiming in their life to get to what they want?
I think I genuinely believe that anyone with the proper resources and backing could have done what we've done. There's nothing really special about it. It's just that me, my co-founder, the team, we are passionate about space and this is the sector that we wanted to work in. And there was an opportunity that we saw and we said, let's do it. So I think the first step to anyone that's wanting to do it is just go ahead and do it because no matter what you do, there's always going to be roadblocks, but you just need to begin to to start is to be half done with, right? So that's, I think, the biggest thing I have learned is, if you want to do something, just go ahead and start with it, and then you'll figure it out along the way, and make sure what you're doing is something that you love, something that you're passionate about, because then it doesn't seem like work, right? Every day that I wake up, I am excited to go and work on spacecraft that will go to space, and that will benefit people down here on Earth. So I think, yeah, a couple of things is just begin. If there's some idea, something that you really want to do, just go ahead and do it, and find out what you love and what you want to do in life, and just devote your time and life to it. So that's what I would say from the limited experience that I have.
Great, Aves. I think that's the end of it. But I'll really like to thank you for joining us, accepting our request, taking time out, and really sharing your experiences to the global audience who must have felt a bit enlightened on what technology can, how it can help us in agriculture sector going forward. And we look forward to your company's progress, and we wish you all the best from our side, that you achieve whatever you have planned for. So thanks once again, Avis.
Thank you. This is a pleasure. Thank you for having me.